Watch out! The Republican oppression is coming. That is, if you are to believe Reuters when it hasn't taken its pills, which you shouldn't. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, I actually made a video about this topic 2 years ago called Voter ID is Normality, Not Racism, published in August 2015. That will be the original current year. But this particular article from Reuters makes it worthwhile to talk a bit more about this because it is fascinating to see the amount of utter nonsense one has to believe in order to oppose voter ID. So, coming from Reuters, Trump's plan to make voters older, wealthier, and whiter. And goes like this, quote, "Whatever else can be said about the Republican Senate healthcare bill, it cannot be accused of pandering. The Better Care Reconciliation Act, which Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell hopes to bring to a vote next week, is astonishingly unpopular, often getting less than 20% support in polls. There isn't a single state in which a majority favors the GOP's proposals. In a starkly polarized political environment, it's almost impossible for a major proposal to be this widely hated. So why would the House pass a similar bill, and why didn't McConnell immediately bury it? Many Republican legislators are insulated from even the fiercest political backlash because the political playing field is tilted strongly towards the GOP side. Now, the White House is about to make it even more so with a scheme to shrink the electorate and skew it towards the GOP. In late June, the Trump administration announced a series of measures to constrict the body politic, making it older, whiter, and wealthier, and therefore more Republican. The Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity is asking for detailed state data about voters. There already is evidence that merely asking for the data is stopping people from registering. Voting rights experts say that because voter rolls inevitably contain errors, such as still listing voters who recently moved, the Trump administration is likely planning to use these discrepancies to justify vote suppression efforts such as onerous identification requirements. And anyway, the rest of the article deals with gerrymandering, which is a separate topic that I won't address now. But onerous identification requirements? Really? Again, India is the largest democracy in the world with 815 million voters. A few hundreds of millions of those live on $50 a month, and oftentimes a lot less than that. Yet for some reason, they can all have government photo IDs to show at the polling station before casting their vote. The same is true in Mauritius, a literal slave state, and in Rwanda, a country decimated by genocide. They can do that literally everywhere on Earth, but not in the blue states of the United States. There, it is suddenly racist, onerous, and unfeasible. Really? It is really hard to understand. How can an American leftist simultaneously believe that you can have a gigantic, cradle-to-the-grave welfare state and be able to pay for it, yet for some reason you can't really have all voters get photo identification? That's for some reason deemed too expensive and onerous. More to the point, it's not like most states with voter ID laws haven't made accommodations. In most of them, you can get a photo ID at no cost for you, the citizen, and get it even in the election day. Yet the ACLU and the rest of the far-left clique still thinks that's not enough. And this is really peculiar and specific to the American leftists. It's something that, for some reason, doesn't even cross the mind of any leftist outside the United States. I can't imagine the Labour Party or the Swedish Socialdemokraterna or even the Swedish Communist Party advocating for this, or the Indian leftists, or the Labour Party in Australia, or any leftist anywhere. Heck, even in Venezuela, the communists support voter ID. So why not in the United States? What makes American leftists different? Now, rightists would say that American leftists resist voter ID laws because that could affect their possibility of busing people around to vote multiple times or even to let illegals to vote. And there is some truth to that, no doubt about it. And there is no question that the left is throwing all of its ammunition to try to stop the United States from joining the rest of the planet on this topic. Reuters, which usually steers clear from this, publishes this overtly partisan blathering, which argues that Kansas's voter ID bill is controversial and therefore bad because it's been subjected to 4 separate lawsuits by the ACLU. But since when is that a reasonable measure? A policy is bad or it isn't. The opinion of ACLU has nothing to do with it. And what exactly is so horrible about Kansas's policy adopted as a signature bill by the now chair of the Presidential Advisory Commission on Election Integrity, Mr. Chris Kobach? What exactly is so bad about it? Well, the law says that if you want to register to vote via the DMV, you are required to prove American citizenship first. That's it. And the ACLU has been harassing the state of Kansas for the last 6 years in courts because they deem this as disadvantageous for minority voters. Really? Is it really that hard to get a birth certificate? Or I guess the more sensible question is it really that hard to take care of your birth certificate issued at birth? I mean, my great-grandma had her original birth certificate from the 19th century until her death in the 21st century, and her house has been bombarded twice in both world wars. How could she keep her vital records through 2 world wars and 50 years of a totalitarian regime, but for some reason it's too hard for these minorities to take care of their records during peacetime in the wealthiest country in the world? It's a serious question. Is it really such an onerous request on a particular subset of citizens to be responsible with their papers, and if they lose them, because sometimes, let's face it, that can happen without your intent, that's clearly the case, but if or when they lose them, they'd get a duplicate? Is it really such an onerous request that they are simply incapable by and large to fulfill it? I don't think it is. It's the basic requirement to literally any other person anywhere on the planet. But if it is really that onerous, then comes the next question. What makes that particular subset on the population, minorities in blue states that is, so bad that it can't deal with such basic stuff that everyone else has been dealing with for over 100 years now? And my answer is nothing. Nothing makes that subset of the population so bad at this, because it is not the minorities that are the problem. It's the leftists that are the problem. And by leftists, I mean the ideologues in the ACLU, not your average Negro who might vote Democratic this time around, but the elitist leftists, the Baizhu, as the Chinese would call them, or the mindless white liberals, as Americans would call them, though I don't regard these people as liberal. They're anything but liberal. After carefully studying, one can only conclude that the real racists are exactly these ACLU types. They legitimately believe that black people are so stupid that they can't go online to get an ID in a country where everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. When pointing that out to them, they flat out say, well, they don't have the knowledge. Here, take a look.
They're bad. I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in
areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also would make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon.
This, my fellow deplorables, is bigotry of the real kind. You see, American leftists, and this is really unique to them, American leftists legitimately see non-white people as inferior and thus need to be pampered and herded along the way to the voting booth. So any law or policy that would subject them to things that are actually normal in a civilization triggers an automatic emotional response in American leftists. Those people can't do that, you see. They don't have the knowledge. The equality nonsense is just for show. On this issue, the American left has consistently demonstrated that it legitimately believes that non-white people aren't capable enough to master things like maintaining a birth certificate or use once in several years when you renew your driver's license and register to vote. And then have the license with you when you go to the polling station. That's too complicated, American leftists tell us. And it is from this mentality that the rest then derives. The rest being the big welfare state, the relentless opposition to very sensible voter ID laws, and so on and so forth. Because again, no matter how you look at it, it is perfectly reasonable to have to prove you're a citizen before you can vote. I mean, last time I voted in the last elections in December 2016, I had to show my ID to prove not only that I'm a citizen, but also that I live in the area of the polling station. The ID was then electronically scanned to also prove that it's not fake, and then I was handed ballots and a stamp, because we don't do it via a pencil here like in the United Kingdom, but with stamps. Anyway, good enough. And every time my ID expires, I have to go with the birth certificate again to prove my citizenship. Nobody thinks of this as being onerous or expensive. It's just, normal. Because that's what voter ID is, normality. To claim otherwise means to claim that some adults are so stupid that they can't manage things that a 5-year-old can understand, and to make that claim solely on skin color. So next time you encounter one of these helicopterables, tell them that their opposition to voter ID is racist. Because it is. Basically, what I'm saying is not new, but it needs repeating. On any issue, people on the non-left should strive to turn the tables on the left. They call you racist for supporting voter ID? Turn the tables on them. Call them racist and bigoted, because they are, and prove it via the easy rationale to the neutral observer why their position is racist and bigoted. In other words, this is not a policy dispute as much as it is a mentality and cultural dispute. Those opposing voter ID have a cultural problem of their own, and that needs to be challenged. Now I'll send this video to every Republican operative that I can get a hold of, because right now the American right fights this issue on policy, legality, and technicality. Now that's a nice way of losing it over the long run. Politics is downstream from culture, and that means you have to fight the culture and the mentality that drives these anti-voter ID activists. Yes, I know that's hard, but it's also efficient over the long run. Anyway, that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your constant and generous support. And I'll see you around on Freedom Alternative.